video or something like that is that I want this to be interactive as much as possible. So um, if you have your microphone on and you talk and ask questions, this will go a lot better for everybody. Um, like I like my classes not just to be me talking, but a a dialogue. So I find out what you guys are thinking about, where you're at, what your questions are. So instead of just me talking about whatever I want to talk about, I can kind of focus what I'm saying as to what it is that you want to know and you want to learn. If you don't feel comfortable um, speaking, and this is being streamed live as well on YouTube, and there will be a recording. Um, so if you don't feel comfortable speaking, there is a chat that I have open in the Discord. The chat for this room, I guess. So you can type in what you want there, and I'll see it. Um, cool. So let's jump in. Today, I'm going to talk about the intro to drawing from imagination. It's kind of an overview of what I teach. There's going to be a lot of information and not a ton of specifics because this is a like an intro, like a general overview. So let's start with a little bit of discussion. What do you think makes for a successful drawing from imagination? Good composition. Yeah, I think composition's important. Being able to picture the things in your head. Um, so I'll riff on that a little bit. Being able to picture the things in your head is one thing, but talking about getting it onto the image. So how would you know if you were successful with the image, not just the idea in your head? Okay. So I'm going to dig deeper on both of those because I think those are good answers, but I want to get a little bit deeper. How would you, so why, I'll start with the composition. Why do you want to have good composition? Why does that make a drawing successful? Hmm. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, a pretty good definition. Well, let me dig in a little bit more to the other answer then, that the what makes a successful drawing is that it looks like what you have going on in your head. How would you know? Or if it communicates the ideas that you have in your head, how would you know that it communicates the ideas successfully? Sure. No, it's never gonna be exact, but um, you could be more successful with some attempts than others. So how would you know if you're more successful? What would you look for in your drawing? Okay. Yeah, I get that answer a lot, and I think there is definitely truth to that, but I'll pitch another question to you. If you took a drawing class with me and we didn't talk at all about drawing, but I spent the whole class giving you lots of positive psychology and by the end of it, you felt better about your drawing. It looked better to you. Would you consider that a successful class? Is that a class you would sign up for? Hmm. Yeah, I usually ask that. That comes up in my classes, and most people say no. They don't want to take a class where I just make them feel better. Um, so, and then you talked about improvement, but that kind of that's kind of a circular one because improvement implies that there's some level of success. The reason I'm asking these questions is because it's very important for me and in the way I teach to be as clear as possible on our goal. Because um, I don't want to teach you to draw like me. I don't want to impose my taste on you guys. I want you to have skills, have the tools that allow you to draw the way you want to. So um, I think it depends. It can depend on what you want to do with the art piece. That is definitely true. Yeah. Which is where I'm leading to. Like, I have to teach somebody to draw, we have to go towards something, but I don't want that to be just what I think is good. So I'm going to pitch drawing from imagination as kind of a theory. Um, and so first, tell me if this resonates with you. You want to be able to draw so that if somebody looks at your drawing, it feels like they're looking at a real thing, or they're and that real thing is in space. Like the frame of your drawing is kind of like a window into a world. Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm not going to teach like abstract art. That's not what I do. Um, but I can teach to into to to create drawings that look like a window into another world. Um, Actually, one more piece of housekeeping before I forget is I'm going to talk a lot because, I'm the teacher. And but in real life, I would be able to see your hand, or I'd be able to like see your faces so I can know, I get like social cues to know when to stop talking. We don't really get that on the internet. So if at any point you have a question or something to say, just say it. Just feel free to interrupt me. Um, so yeah, we want to create drawings that are a window into another world or into a world of our ideas. That's going to be the working definition for tonight, and really for all of my teaching. Like I could talk about other stuff in bits and pieces, but for what I mainly do is creating fictional worlds through images. Just translate your ideas into believable images. Um, so the way we do that is that we want to create a image that looks like it's a fictional visual experience. When you look at the image, it feels like you are there looking at the image through your own eyes, not through an image. Um, so to understand a little bit more about that, let's take a real quick look at how our visual system actually works. So it may seem as though our eyes are like little cameras and we see a thing and our eyes give us a video feed of our surroundings. But in reality, we see if our eyes take in light, that is like a camera, but then our brain does a whole bunch of processing to create our experience of seeing. And this is an important distinction because our um, experience of seeing is not like a video feed, which is made up of 2D images or like a series of photographs. It is a three-dimensional representation of our surroundings that is constructed. So, what this means for us in terms of drawing is that we want to give enough information in our drawing that the viewer will look at our drawing and they will be able to construct that three-dimensional reality for themselves. This makes the drawing really immersive. It makes it feel like a real place. It makes characters feel like they're alive. Makes sense so far? Okay, well let's look at an example. So what are we seeing here? A battle. We're seeing gladiators. We're seeing they're in an arena. There's a crowd. Those are all ideas. You're not actually seeing any of those. You're seeing colorful pixels on a screen that are a reproduction of oil on canvas. But this works because the artist, Jean Leon Jerome, is able to arrange the colors on the canvas in a way that communicates those ideas. And it's there, the ideas are presented in a way that's similar to how this would look if we were actually there. Even though there is no real there that we could be. This place, I mean, the Colosseum was or is a real place, but when Jerome painted it, it didn't look like this. There were no gladiators. Um, but there is a fictional world. There's space. There's real three-dimensional characters that occupy it. So I'll start with a question. Where are where are we in where like the viewer in this painting? Yeah, we're in the Colosseum, but where in the space of the Colosseum? Right. Yeah. So that's very clear communication of the space. How do we know? Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of perspective techniques that's going on. So the horizon line, yeah, it's like somewhere around here. Things that are below the horizon line, we see the tops of. Things that are above the horizon line, we see the bottom of, like the ceiling here, that kind of thing. So it's consistent with being seen from a single point of view. How do we know this is a gladiator? Because that's an idea. The armor, yeah. Um, the shield, the sword, all of that stuff. Yeah. What they're doing, yeah, the context clues. How do we know it's a person? Exactly. Yeah, there's human information that's being conveyed in ways we're used to seeing it. And the armor, same thing. The armor, it looks like metal because it's reflecting light the way that metal does. These are all ideas that are being communicated in a way. So, what we're doing when we draw from imagination is we're taking our ideas. So let's say this was our vision before, but now this is the idea that the viewer had, and they're translating it into an image. But actually, before that, the visual experience, it's our three-dimensional surroundings. So our surroundings, and we recognize objects in the surroundings, like the gladiator, like the Colosseum, that kind of thing. Those are ideas. These ideas are clear because of their forms, right? Like we recognize the anatomical features of the gladiator, three-dimensional, the space there, or the walls of the Colosseum, they're three-dimensional. Those forms are in space. So we recognize that the gladiator was a certain distance from that wall. That wall is a certain distance from our standpoint as a viewer, which is a certain distance from that. And not only that, but the objects, their forms are in the same space relative to each other that they should be. Like the head is above the torso, which is above the hips. And then light, which is the light and dark that we see, that the shadows, if I go back to the painting, um, there's a light source, and all of the shadows are on one side. That makes sense with where that light is coming from. Yep. Yep. That also reveals where the light is coming from. Good eye. Okay. So these are the things that we need to communicate to make our imagination work, or just to make an image, not even necessarily our imagination work, but to make an image look like visual experience. And position, especially because we want it to look like it's seen from a single point of view, because we see the world from a single point of view. So we want the image to seem as if we're seeing it from a single point of view. Like, for example, if we look at this image, it looks like a block or a cube that's sitting on a checkerboard, because all of these shapes are consistent with that construction. Like we're taking these shapes and we're constructing a mental model of that space. And all of the shapes are consistent, so it allows us to do this. If one of the shapes doesn't make sense, it looks wrong. It looks like either the box is distorted or there's like a flat shape on top of that space. But either way, it's breaking the realism. Or in this case, you have consistent forms, but they're not consistent with being seen from a single point of view. So they end up not looking right. Do we see this? Yep, cool. Um, no, it's because the we're seeing the box from one angle and we're seeing the checkerboard from another angle. Or the shapes are consistent with being seen from different angles. Sure. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Um, so let's talk about how, or one more step. We are translating the forms, positions, and light we see. We're translating that into visual elements. These are the vocabulary that we have as artists. These are like loose categories of the marks or lack of marks we can make on the page. So these are lines, shapes, values, proportions, and color. I'm not going to define them. I think most of them they're clear enough, at least for an overview, so that becomes our image. And then somebody else comes along and they see our image and they're able to construct their own mental model of our three-dimensional ideas in a way that's similar enough to ours that we're successfully communicating. So one more important thing about our visual perception. Do you see the crowd way in the background in this painting? Yeah. Yeah, up in the sunlight. They all look like real people. It's a full crowd. Right. They're not as detailed as the people up in the front. If you go in and you look at this in isolation, this doesn't even look that much like people. But when you look at it in context, it looks like people because your brain is filling in missing information. When our visual system constructs our mental model of reality, it's not just doing that based on the light we see, it's also using pattern recognition because it makes the process much faster. Imagine how much longer it would take to see everything if we had to like look at every detail of a thing to recognize what it was. Instead, we see enough that we can recognize it and our brain fills it in from our memory. The reason this is so important for us in drawing is because it means we don't, to get somebody to construct the mental model that we want, we don't need to tell them everything. We just need to tell them enough that they can fill in the rest. And this is important because it gives us a lot of freedom as artists. So we don't have to, like, we can choose what aspects of our idea or what aspects of what we see, if we're drawing from life, are the important ones. It's like telling a story. Like if you were a writer and you were telling a story, you would choose which aspects of the events of the story you want to include, and then you would translate those ideas into words. Somebody would read those words and they would build a mental model of the events based on the information you gave them. And they'd fill in details and make assumptions as well. So this is important because this really leads to work being immersive. Like, for example, how many times you've seen an anime character where they don't draw the nose, or excuse me, or they only suggest the nose with like a couple lines, or like that little shape on the bottom. Do you assume that that character has no nose, or do you fill in that they have a nose? Yeah, yeah, you fill it in. So you, it's still immersive. It still becomes a real character. Um, okay, so that's our goal. Uh, are are we in alignment here? Does this make sense as a goal? Is something you'd want to pursue? Yeah, cool. So let's talk about how to get there. So I'm gonna list some skills that will help us get there. The first is observation. So this is studying our own visual experience and learning how to describe it. We're basically doing all of this whole process, except first we're going to, so here's the real world. We're going to see the light positions and forms. We're going to see the surroundings and the objects, and we're going to have the visual experience. Then we're going to translate our experience of forms and surroundings into visual elements, into the drawing, and somebody else would see our drawing and they'd be able to imagine having the same visual experience that we did, or a similar visual experience. Um, so this is really important. Even though we want to draw from imagination eventually, we start from observation so we can build the language that we use to describe things that we imagine later on. So when we're drawing from observation, we're translating the form's positions in light. Or first, we need to recognize the form's position in light that we see. We recognize it unconsciously when we're building our mental model, but to include it consciously in our drawing, we need to recognize it and notice it purposefully. Then we translate the form's positions in light as we choose how much of it we want to include into visual elements, into the drawing, and then somebody else can recognize what we're drawing. This is really important because we're going to use the same language to draw from imagination. When we're drawing from imagination, instead of our visual experience, we're going to take our ideas and we're going to express our ideas in terms of forms, positions, and light. And because we already know how to draw that, then we'll just follow the skills, use the skills we used when we studied from observation to uh, get our ideas to exist, to communicate our ideas in a form that somebody watching would be able to recognize. Then the next skill we want to build is perspective. So perspective allows us to invent forms and position. Um, possession, perspective is especially important because this is how we create an image that looks like it's seen from a single point of view. This is what perspective does. Um, so with perspective, we invent forms and the position of those forms where they're seen from. We can start with linear perspective, which is something that you might be familiar with. If not, that's the thing with the vanishing points and the horizon line. You guys must have heard of this before. Um, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that's linear perspective. And that lets us plot forms as they would look from a specific point of view with geometry. So we'll get them right. Oh, we'll know exactly how to get them right. But I'm guessing you don't want to have to plot every form with geometry every time you draw. That doesn't sound like very much fun to me. So instead, what we would do is we would draw intuitively, and then we would use linear perspective to check our work. So I drew this box without plotting anything. Then I would use perspective to check my work. Didn't do a great job with this one. Hold on. I guess it's okay. And when you do this, with the box is one thing, but doing it with something, doing with cylinders, doing with an entire room, the more you do this, the more you train your ability to draw forms and space intuitively. Because you keep practicing it, you internalize it, but you have to make sure you internalize it correctly, so you check it. Then light is intellectually very simple. You study how light behaves, the physical properties of light and how that appears when it hits forms. You study that, and then you can invent it, so you know how it would behave in certain situation, which allows you to imagine it. Excuse me. So does this all make sense so far? I know this is a lot of information at once, but this is our foundation. Actually, before I move on, one thing I almost forgot about with observation is when you're drawing from observation, it's very important that you don't use photographs. Because when you're drawing from life, you see your surroundings, your objects, you see forms, positions, and light. You have to translate them into visual elements. So there's a translation skill here in order to make a drawing work. When you're drawing from a photograph, because a photograph is already an image, it has visual elements. It has lines, it has shapes, it has proportions. And your drawing is also visual elements. Elements. There's the translation here from between form, position, and light to visual elements is not happening. But you need that translation skill to be able to draw from imagination. Um, you also need that translation skill to draw from life. So if you just learn to draw from photos, it becomes much harder to translate your ideas. And it's also much harder to draw from life. You haven't built that translation skill. So you get really good at drawing from photos, but it's hard to do anything else. That's a trap that I've definitely seen artists fall into, where you get really good at drawing from photos, but then you can't do anything else because the skills you built, a lot of them are the skills you built do transfer. The being good with your medium, those skills transfer, but you're missing a key skill in that translation. So that's where it doesn't transfer. Anyway, um, so we have our foundation. Then we can use this foundation to learn to draw things. With perspective, we started with basic forms. Then, like learning to draw those forms intuitively. We can combine those basic forms into the structure of an object. So I'm drawing this chess piece in cylinders. And like this is the Drawbox stuff that you might be familiar with if you spend time on Reddit. Um, it's a good start. You still need the observation skills to fill in those details that make it actually look like a chess piece and not a or whatever object you're studying and not a collection of um, basic forms of cylinders and boxes. But you've built the skills to draw those basic forms from any angle. So if you study an object made out of those basic forms, you can draw that structure from any angle, which then makes it much easier to put the details on afterwards. So between breaking it down into a structure and learning its details from drawing from life, you can learn to draw an object from imagination from any angle. Then you probably want to learn to draw something more interesting than just like a chess piece or something, than some random object. Most people want to learn anatomy. Uh, so the skills you used here, you can use those to learn anatomical forms. So you study the forms of something from many different angles, just like you did with that object, and then you learn to draw it from your head from multiple angles. And then you've created anatomical forms. You to really get good at anatomy, you learn all of them. You learn the forms of the bones, you learn the forms of the muscles until you can draw them from your head from a bunch of different angles. Then you learn how to connect them, then you have a human. And there's more to it as well. Like you have to study humans to learn the details. You have to make artistic choices as well. But that is the intro simplified version of how to draw figures from imagination. Uh, Another important thing that comes from learning anatomy is that you can use that process of learning to draw a figure analytically, where you learn the forms of its component parts, how they fit together, and how to build them. You can learn any other subject like that. If you want to learn to draw an animal, you can do the same thing. You learn its anatomy, you learn the texture of its skin and hair and teeth or whatever, uh, and then you can construct it. Or you want to learn how to draw like a fighter jet or something like that. You learn the parts that make it up. You learn the forms of the wings of the cockpit, the jets, all that good stuff, and then you combine that and you make a thing. You can draw the plane. The other cool thing is if you know these kind of things, then you can modify them as well. You're not stuck copying a reference. So if I want to draw a skull that's not like a human skull, I want it to be like an orc skull or something, I can modify the human skull, give it a smaller cranium and big cheeks, big mouth and teeth, um, a less defined chin, that kind of thing. So even though I've never seen an orc skull before, I can modify what I do know about human skulls to create something new. Or, and like I'm also combining stuff like these teeth would be like a warthog or something like that. So I'm taking inspiration from other sources as well and recombining them to make my own new thing. And then you can draw really anything. If you take the time to study it and you can imagine it, you can draw it. Then the last part of this equation is composition, which we talked about earlier. This is using the visual elements formally, like how to arrange them to be interesting, how to arrange them to be clear. It's also like, again, if we go back to writing, when you write an essay, you don't just write all your thoughts out like right as they come to you. You have a main idea, and then you have ideas that support that idea and ideas that support those ideas, and you frame it in a logical way that's so somebody who is reading your writing understands the point you're trying to make as clearly as possible. The same is true with art. So in this example, we have the main idea that there is a gladiator, and then we have supporting ideas like his helmet and his armor, that a gladiator is a human, and we know that because of the anatomy. So we know that this is a helmet because of its form and because of its texture, so because it's metal. And then you can work your way down these compositional chains. And then we know it's metal because of the colors and the way that or I should maybe even before I get to color have light and then reflection, but you get to colors and shapes. So you work your way up and down these chains. Like nobody actually draws them out like this, but this is to explain the ideas so that every color, every shape, every line, it supports your main idea. So that's the other aspect of composition. Um, yeah, so that's the theory I have for you guys today. I know that was a lot of information at once. I'm summarizing a 600 plus page book. But did that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay. No, that's down the line. That's getting into the details of how that's an aspect of linear perspective. And this lecture, it can't, this is more of an overview than anything specific. But if you check out chapter 2 of that book, you'll find out what vanishing points are. And another question. Hmm. That was a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. I should have clarified this more. So it's not that you shouldn't draw from photos. I draw from photos all the time. It's that when you're learning to draw from observation, you don't want to use photos. Like when you're learning to draw from observation, when you're doing studies and stuff, like you're doing still lifes and stuff like that to learn these observational skills, to learn to how to translate your experience into visual elements, it's very important that you don't use photos. When you're referencing something specific, then that's where photos are really important. Um, like if you could be there and have the thing you're referencing in real life, that's better. But a lot of stuff that's really not practical. Like if you want to draw an animal, that animal's going to be moving around, so you use photos. Or like if it's like a lion or something, you can't go and hang out with it. It might eat you. So that, yeah. So thank you. Okay, so let's now that we're on board with what we want to do, let's get into the specifics, or not the specifics. We're not that would take way too long. Let's get into the kind of the overall plan for how to learn it. This is more about like teaching theory in general, how I teach, but this is like the theory that if you get teacher training, they give you as well. Not all of it, of course, because this is art specific, but you learn to draw by drawing. This is, I'm sure, a very uncontroversial statement. All this theory can help, but the main thing that's going to get you there is action. So I divide that action into two main categories, and it's important to balance these two. So that is study and play. So study is when you're drawing specifically to get better at something, get better at fundamental skills, to learn what a specific thing looks like, that kind of thing. And study is very important. And then play is when you're drawing to express yourself. This is the art that you make because that's why you wanted to learn how to make art. Or maybe I could flip those around. This is, you study so you can do the play. And it's really important to balance these two because I've seen the imbalance, and it's a problem either way. The imbalance of play, I think, is more common and much less of a problem. The imbalance of play is when you get people who they can't be bothered to study. Study is boring. They just want to draw their characters and draw the things that they want to. And this can get you to you can get really good at drawing just by doing this. The problem with that is it's not reliable. Um, it's like you set off on a journey with no map and you end up where you end up, just like looking around and seeing what looks cool. You might get somewhere cool, you might not. And it's not particularly good if you want to be a professional because you have to get to where the client needs you to go. You can't just wander around and hope you get there. Um, the other imbalance is study. This one is way more common on the internet, where people just grind studies, drawing those 250 boxes, just doing nothing but study, in hopes that it will skip the ugly phase where your drawings don't look good. It won't. You get better at whatever you practice. Whatever you practice is what you internalize. So internalizing all the fundamentals through study is very useful, but all you'll get good at is those fundamental exercises. Until you put your put it into drawing the actual art, the actual expression, it's just it's just boxes and stuff. Um, there's no way to get around having to do a bunch of ugly art in your learning process because you want to learn to draw like you, not just like just boxes and stuff. To find out what you like and what your voice is, you have to do it. It's kind of like if you're playing a sport, the study is your training, so your coach has you do drills. But if you never actually go play the sport, you still won't get better at the sport no matter how many drills you do. Um, and then I'm not going to teach you guys the play. I would feel like that is irresponsible because I don't want to impart my voice onto you. I want you to go forth and find your own voice. Study, I find, is effective when I divide it into another two components, which is exercises and projects. So exercise, and the difference is scale and intention. Exercises are they're like very specifically designed to put theory into practice. So in my book is full of exercises. These exercises, they come right after a section on theory, so that you don't really understand the theory until you actually like make the moves with your hand and do the thing. So the point of exercises is to get you experience that helps you understand the theory in a like a physical way, in an action way. But the drawings themselves that result of the exercises, they're almost kind of irrelevant. They're a byproduct. The actual product is project product, whatever. The actual product is the experience that you get from doing the exercise. Projects are drawings that you do to prove that you really understand the theory. So these are um, drawings, paintings, projects that you would not be able to do if you didn't understand the theory. So, for example, with perspective, in my perspective classes at the animation school, one of my projects that I give my students is to draw a room that is simplified. So, all of the furniture, all of the walls, all the windows and doors are just boxes. And they have to draw that room from multiple angles and still have it look like the same room. And they have to like place the camera and what would that room look like from the camera in that position. So they would not be able to do that if they didn't understand the perspective theory that lets them do it. And then I can look at those projects and I can tell if they understand it, and if they're making mistakes, I can show them where they're making mistakes to help them understand the theory. Um, if we were in a class, the way this would work is I'll start in the middle of a class or a tutoring session. It starts with theory. That's what we're doing now. Then I would give you either exercises or projects or both. Then you go off, sorry, before that, I would demo to make those as clear as possible. Then you would go off, you would do that, you would come back, and I'd give you feedback to make sure you are on the right track. Um, so, unfortunately, this is not a course. These lectures are going to be one offs because I want them to be where people can come in without having had the previous ones. And like, also, this is free. So, like, doing regular feedback, that's not going to happen. This is the kind of thing that we would do if if this is the kind of thing we do in the mentorships, and eventually I hope to be able to do group classes as well if I can get enough interest. Um, that makes it logistically possible. Still figuring that out. I don't think I'm there yet, but that would that would be good. Would be easier for me and cheaper for you guys. So something to think about in the future. Um, what I sorry, what I do have though coming up is I have a free course that I will be releasing in a few weeks. Um, it won't like you're still going to have to be on your own for feedback, but it has all of the rest of the stuff. It has theory, it has exercises, it has demos, and uh, it builds to complete a project. So be on the lookout for that. Um, one more thing about, or actually, let me take a breath here before I talk about one more thing. Um, questions, thoughts. Awesome. Um, so one more thing about study is it one of the biggest game changers in my art development was I started planning my study, like scheduling my study, I should say. So at the beginning of the week, I would write down the study I want to do, the time I had to do it, and what study I would do when. So that when that time rolled around, I wasn't like looking for references. I wasn't trying to find my materials. I wasn't like, oh, what should I do today? I had a plan and I sat down and I did it. Does anybody work like that? No? Nice. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great plan. Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's you're already better than most. Most people just if they're not like in a school or something that forces you to have a structure, they'll just do whatever. Um, so having a schedule is really like for me, total game changer. Really important. Um, so I would have my study block of time, and for me, I like 90 minutes, but it's it's your life, it's your schedule. Do what works for you. And that 90-minute would be a specific time. I like to work in the morning, so let's say 7:30 to 9 a.m. That's my time. I blocked it out ahead of time, go to work, get ready for work at 9, get up early, go do my studies. Um, it's very useful to be specific about this for your own goal setting. So if you say, I want to get better at art, I'll draw more. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. How will you know if you don't measure it? Or you'll say, "Oh, I'm going to study later," and then you don't study later. You can just rationalize it to yourself, like, "Yeah, I'm still going to study later. That later just hasn't happened yet." If instead you schedule your time, like I'm going to study for 90 minutes at 7:30 tomorrow morning, and then you don't, you you let yourself down. You've created a specific thing that you had to achieve, and you either did it or you didn't. Now, I know life gets in the way sometimes, but if you spent that hour and a half like scrolling on your phone, then that was opportunity you could have been using for drawing. Personally, I like to do, or I like to approach with, oops, 30 minutes. Wait, doing this wrong. 30 minutes of exercises, and those make for very nice warm ups. And then 60 minutes on your project. Um, could have used this box better, but that's me. The important thing is that you're planning and you're scheduling the intention. The other really important thing about scheduling is that it can be really good for your mental health because sometimes when you're an artist and you really want to get good, you feel this drive to like, oh, I need to study all the time. I need to draw all the time. If I'm not drawing, I feel bad because I could be getting better and I'm not. And it's not great for your mental health to be putting that pressure on yourself and feeling that way. Um, like you're hanging out with your friends and you feel guilty because like, yeah, I could be studying. It's not good. So if you make a study schedule and you stick to that study schedule, you'll know that you're doing what you need to do to progress. And if you don't, or sorry, and if you do that, then you can relax in the time that's not your study schedule. Go hang out with your friends. Go do the drawing for fun. I started planning drawing recently. Yeah, that's fantastic. What Panoptis, I hope I'm saying that right, wrote in the chat. I started planning for drawing recently. I write my grandiose idea, and break it down to the skills I need for it, and start grinding accordingly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Um, yeah, so that is everything I wanted to cover with this lecture. I hope it was useful for you. Does anybody have any questions? No, no, that's why we're doing these lectures. I want you guys to ask questions. Right. Yeah. Um, Projects are tough when you're self-taught. Um, well, actually, I did forget is that the a big a big purpose of this lecture is um, if you guys are familiar with that, I have a book, a textbook in the resources section of this Discord server. You can use if you're doing this on your own, you can use that book to help you with most of the stuff. Obviously, a book can't give you feedback, or and the demos are just pictures. But the so the book will give you theory and it will give you exercises. And some of the later exercises you could use as projects. It's not as good as if you had a teacher giving you projects, but it does give you an example to shoot for. Like um, that exercise I described, or the project I described giving to my prospective students to draw the room from multiple angles, that is in the book. Um, it's in chapter 2, like kind of early on. It's like I can't go into quite as much detail as I would if it were a real class because it's a book. But yeah, that's how that works. Where can we find the recording of the lecture was asked in the chat, and they will be, I think, in the course resource, the official resource section of the Discord server. They take some time to process. The one from earlier today is already processed, so I'll post that. I'm going to make some edits because there's a whole bunch of time in the beginning of me trying to figure out how to use streaming software. But yeah, that should be out pretty soon. And then this one will be out. It takes hours for them to process them, but whenever it's processed and I have the time, I'll put it in the resource section as well. So you'll have access to the recording. Um, any other questions? Got a thumbs up. Okay, well, one more thing before we wrap. I'll tease next week's lecture. Like I said, these are one-offs, not a course that builds. That is coming, but these are just one-off lectures. Next week, I'm going to talk about how I learned to draw skulls, because that's what we're doing right now, and I'll do some demos of skull drawing and skull studies. So hope you guys are into this and you want to come back next week for more lectures. I'm going to be doing them the same time every week as long as I can. All right. You mean the course challenge? Uh, you could use it like that. I feel weird about challenges if I'm being 100% honest with you guys. Like I've never been interested in art challenges because I have had an art job for a long time. Already have people telling me what to draw all the time. When I'm drawing in my free time, I don't want someone else telling me what to do, but people like them. So I wanted to make one that's as fun as possible. And I know a lot of people were already uh, posting skull drawings on the server, and I like drawing skulls. So that's why I created that. Cool. Any closing thoughts or questions before we call it a night? All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. This was a lot of fun, and I'll see you around on the server, and hopefully, I'll see you next week for another lecture. Awesome. Night, everybody.